I read this quote because there's a special friend here today who I'm very, very proud of, and I'm so happy for. She has a very unique story, and she's going to share that story with you. And she has been in a fight for quite some time. And she has been doing great things with her life. She has been doing great things with her family and great things with her career. And I have had the pleasure of knowing her for a number of years. Her name is attorney Lynn Burke.
Hello, Lynn.
There's 40,000 people in prison in the state of North Carolina, 2,000 of them are women. And of those women, 80% of them have children. I think it's 73% of the men have children. And North Carolina has no statistics about where these kids are, who these kids are, and where these kids are. We're one of the last in the country that doesn't keep track of this kind of thing and try to help out what's going on with these kids. 20 years ago, I was incarcerated myself in North Carolina at the North Carolina Correctional Center for Women in Raleigh. I had wrote some checks, stole some stuff, took it back to the store. I had 4 small children. My son was 5, my twins were 4, and I had a 3-year-old. And I was in prison for a 10-year sentence. I'm not trying to rationalize what happened during that time. I was a single mother. My mother had passed away about 7 months before I ended up getting incarcerated, and she was like my best friend. My parents, my father was an attorney, my mother was a nurse. There's really no excuse for what happened in my life, except for the fact that right after I graduated from high school, I got pregnant, and my parents wanted me to give my child up for adoption because I didn't have any education. I didn't know what I was doing, and my child was biracial. And I'm not mad at my parents or my mother for trying to make me do that. They thought what they was doing was the right thing. Nobody teaches you how to be a parent. Nobody gives you a book when you have kids. So my parents did what they thought was the right thing to do. And what they used to do back in the 50s was hide it and pretend like it didn't happen and send somebody off and they come back and what happened? Where were you? And nobody talks about it. But I couldn't do that. When I had my son, I tried to go through the routine. I got sent to my mother's home. I tried to go through the routine of pretending like I was giving him up for adoption because I knew I didn't have anywhere to go. My mother said I couldn't come back home if I'd rather be back. So back then you had 30 days to change your mind if you signed your child away. So I pretended like I signed my child up for adoption, gave away my rights and went home with my mother. And within a week I had left and went and got me a job. And was working on trying to get me a place to live because I knew I only had 30 days. So on the 28th day, I didn't have enough money for an apartment. I was scared to death that I wasn't going to be able to get my son back. So his dad came around and said, here, I got these checks you can write. You can go cash them and get the money back, and you can get enough money to get Jimmy back, and you can get all the things you need. And I was 18 years old, and I did it. And I wrote a whole bunch of checks. And when they finally caught me, put me on probation. This was in Tennessee, and I moved down here to be closer to my mother. And by that time, I had 4 kids. By the time all that was over with, I moved down here to North Carolina in 1986. Got into NC State, and everything was going a lot better for me. There was a child care center on campus. I was able to go to school, drop my kids off, and go back home. Well, right before, I want to say 2 days after Thanksgiving, my mother went into a coma and she died. And my father, we still hadn't really made up. So he really wasn't trying to help me, and I had 4 brothers that were younger than me, so I had absolutely no support. And I was so depressed after the death of my mother, I called up to Tennessee to ask her to send one of her daughters down to help me. And who she sent was my kid's father. And by this time, he had a drug problem. So when he came down there, he worked every day, but he gave all his money to the drug man who worked with him too. So I was worse off than I was when she sent him down. And sometimes I would try to get to his job before he could give the money to the drug man, and he would give it to me. And then when I go home, if I didn't spend it on a bill right away, he'd beat me up and take it back. So it was getting to be the point where I just didn't know what to do anymore. And so I started stealing, taking stuff, taking it back, get the money to pay the bills. And within a couple months, I violated my probation. I violated my probation, and I was right back in. And so while I was gone, my kids got to stay with their father. And I know that sounds really weird because he never got in trouble, even though he was a die-hard crackhead. And he was one of those. I don't understand them, but I guess they just don't care about anything, so all they try to do is get the money for drugs. But while my children were there, for the first 6 months when I went to prison, I got really depressed. I thought maybe my children were better off without me. They didn't ask to be here. And who was I, to bring children here and then not be able to take care of them? What kind of person was I? Maybe I was supposed to not be in their life. Maybe I literally was really, really shutting down. I was still grieving for my mother. And I got in a lot of fights while I was in there. And I know that sounds kind of strange. I'm short. Short people got to fight because people think So I was in a lot of fights, and so I was in the hole I got put in the hole for like a month. And while I was in there, one of the guards came and said, "Lynn, you need to come to the administration building. You have a visit." This was like 2 days before Christmas. And I was like, "What? No, I'm not going to visit. What you talking about? Get out of here." She's like, "No, you need to get dressed and come home." So I was like, "Okay, fine, whatever." So I went up there and I was walking up, and I'll never forget this as long as I live, but I counted how many. It was just crazy to me. She had to keep getting her keys out. She kept having to unlock all these doors for me to get through. It was 7 of them. She clocked it open and went back out, locked it. And I was like, oh my God. Like I was some kind of past murder or something. I couldn't believe I had let my life get like that. And when I walked into the administration building, my kids came running. They were like, "Mommy, Mommy, when are you coming home? We love you. We miss you." And it was like, and it was like at that minute, I realized that they needed me. And then I had to stop feeling sorry for myself. And I had to get back to them as fast as I could. And I had to make sure that I stayed there. And I asked God on my way back from visitation that day, that if He would just give me an opportunity to raise them, that I promised that I would do whatever He asked me to do. I got out February the 9th, 1990. Same day as Nelson Mandela. I always have to say that. It was so cool. I was like, wow, me and Nelson Mandela got out on the same day. But I don't know, to me that was like almost a sign because, when he later became president of that country, I started thinking to myself, you can really do anything that you want to do. And to me, even though he went to prison for, something totally different than what I did, it just gave me a lot of hope that, that people maybe can get over stuff. And it took me, I know when I first got home, my kids were always scared I was going to leave them again. You going? I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And my son, when I first got home that day, I was able to kick my kid's daddy out because I was still in the housing projects. And see, what makes me lucky is because I had a place to come home to. A lot of women don't. Because the criteria that they make for people to get their children back when you get out of prison is so high. You have to have make a certain kind of money, have the house have to be so big for everybody, and all that kinds of. Really, I would have never been able to get them that. But because I did, I walked in that day. My son, he ran into us. He said, "Mommy, I got something for you." He ran to his room and he came back and he had my driver's license. Jimmy had kept his driver's license. My driver's license under his pillow for 2 years. From when he was 5 to when he was 7. And sometimes, I always think about that every time it makes me mad. But it's like, that a child at that age could hold on to something for that long a period of time, that he knew I was coming back. And so, I decided that I had to get busy, and I did whatever I had to do to raise those kids and make sure that they didn't turn out like me. All my kids graduated from college. None of them been in trouble. My son is a Raleigh police officer, which is really weird because I had his graduation, and that was... I was in a room full of cops, and I was in there going, I know they're running my tags, man. There's nothing wrong with my car, but I know they're out there running my tags. My daughters have public health degrees, and one of them works at Rex, and the other one works at Wake Medical. And my youngest daughter, Courtney, she graduated from Central with a social work degree, but she wants to be a dentist, so she's over at the dental school at UNC right now trying to do that. So I guess being a good example of what not to do with your life seemed to work. Because my father and mother had 5 children and only 2 of us went to college. So it has nothing to do with money. And I think sometimes people that have been in trouble that, know what maybe their parents could have done to make sure that that didn't happen to them. So it makes us good, even though we might mess up in life as far as, in the society, we can be good parents. Because we understand, like, which my parents have done. They should have, known who my friends were. My parents drink in the evening. My father was a corporate attorney. He thought it was okay to have some martinis when he got home. But that was a great opportunity for us because he's passed out on the couch and we gone. He didn't know what he was doing. You know, all the driving these cars, these kids getting in these car accidents and stuff like that. You know, hey, my kids, the keys were in my bed every night. I knew exactly, you know, I was checking, I had planted cactuses outside the windows. They try to jump out, it's on. And as a parent, I guess what I want you all to know is that we need our children. And that, you know, a lot, you know, maybe there's a 10% of women that are in prison that need to be there that had some issues with their kids, either domestic or you know, child abuse or sexual situations. But the other 80–90% is substance abuse. It's poverty. It's ignorance. And we need our kids because they need us. And I think the only reason that I've made it, and I know it, I know this is the only reason, it's not I think, I know it is. If I wouldn't have been able to get home and get my children back, I never would have been as successful as I am. I went back to state after my youngest daughter graduated from high school. I had my bachelor's in social work. I graduated in 2006, and then I went to Meredith College and got my paralegal certification. When I got out there, I applied to law school at Central. I graduated in 2010, and I took the bars in North Carolina and DC. I passed both of them. North Carolina had a hearing, but they're still waiting to decide whether or not they're going to give me my license. But yesterday, DC gave me my license.